Okay, Laurie, all yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Laurie Zuma. I'm the New York State PTA President. I am so pleased about tonight's web chat. Our New York State PTA leaders as well as some guest presenters on our panel regarding student mental health. We all have been in a serious crisis these last few months, and we're very worried about our children and what it will look like come the fall for our kids getting back to school. So we wanted to reach out to all of you and offer this web chat this evening. I'm very pleased to announce our moderator tonight is Amy Heisick. Amy is a high school science teacher currently in her 16th year teaching in the Syracuse area. She's also the proud mom of a 4th grader, just like me, and the keeper of the school's reptile collection, not like me. Amy believes that building relationships with students and contributing to a positive school climate are of critical importance to unlock student motivation and increase engagement. The message emphasized in her classroom is one of a journey to success that encourages students to view grades as feedback about their current understanding rather than fixed messages. Amy also is the education coordinator for the New York State PTA and the 2017 New York State Teacher of the Year. One of our guest panelists tonight, Amy Malloy. She's the director of the School Mental Health Resource and Training Center at the Mental Health Association of New York State and a member of the Queensbury Union Free School District's Board of Education. Amy is an accomplished trainer and presenter and believes that through learning and honest conversations, we can increase our understanding about mental health and reduce stigma. While this is her life's work, it is important to her as the parent of 3 young adults. Lisa Milady began her career in education as a primary school teacher. It was within those early days that Lisa found her passion to nurture the social and emotional growth of children. For 30 years, elementary school counselor for the Copac Public Schools. In 2000, Lisa wrote a curriculum grant for the Suffolk County Teachers Association called Walk This Way. The lessons highlighted the use of hands-on activities and group counseling sessions. Her efforts were recognized by the Suffolk County Legislature in 2016 for being an exceptional teacher. In recent years, Lisa has also become a published children's picture book author. Her stories are all inspired by her work with her students and her desire to help children understand and manage their emotions. I'd also like to thank past President Bonnie Russell, who's behind the scenes doing all the technology for us, Patty Frazier, Jane Harsha, who have been moderating the previous week's web chats with all of you, and also to our Executive Director, Kyle Belakapitsky, and Dana Welch, and our staff end, doing all the staff behind the scenes. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the program to Amy Heisick.
All right. So we have a list of questions that we have developed, and we're going to have the panelists be able to weigh in on some of those responses. And then we also have questions that have been emailed to the chat email. If at any point, if you have questions or would like to add them, the second half of our webinar, we're going to be addressing those questions from the audience members and from those of you who may be listening. So the 2 ways that you can do that are to email them either to chat@nyspta.org or to type them right in the chat box. We'll be able to do that. So the very first question that we came up with, and I'm not sure who we want to have tackle this one first, but really just what can parents and families be doing right now to support their children who might be struggling with everything that's going on. So Amy or Lisa, I don't know which one wants to tackle that first, but if you want to jump in with suggestions that you have for what parents and families can be doing to support our kids.
Okay, I'll jump in. This is Lisa Milady, and I have some ideas to help parents. Mostly for your own family, it's very important to create routines for everything. What happened was our regular world went away, and now we are scrambling to try to work from home and teach from home and cook so much. I'm sure all of you have cooked more dinners and lunches and breakfasts than you can remember. Our whole life is upside down. So routines help children to feel grounded and comfortable. Also, I would schedule electronic time, times with it, times without it. Also, scheduling quiet times for the family. And parents need it, kids need it. you need to find peace within yourself. And of course, to encourage communication, listening and reflecting children's feelings, and always, always letting kids know that they're safe and things are going to work out and you're in it together. And if you lose your top, that's okay. Just say, you know, we're all in this together and we are going to be okay.
That was great. Thank you. And kind of just following up along that, I think one of the biggest challenges, regardless of, and you know, when I first saw this question, I was like, pick a topic. Like, what could possibly be stressful for kids right now? There are so many things, and it, you know, really depends on our own life experiences and what is most relevant to us right now. But I think that safety is kind of that underlying thing that is being tested right now, whether it is in relation to our routines and the supports that we're accustomed to being disrupted, or whether it's because of the exposure to trauma and violence that we might be experiencing on TV or in our own communities. So that safety piece is really important. So just as you said, really encouraging students to both talk about how they're feeling and also to ask them what they're seeing or hearing. Because I think there's so much information out there that we tend to think that we're all having the same kind of experience or we might be viewing the same thing. But to hear from them in their own words what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're most concerned about is really important so that you can address it in the right way. But that safety piece component is really, really big in listening. I'm also kind of a big believer in the importance of us modeling for our young people how we're dealing and managing with stress. So routines are definitely important in being able to model our adherence to routines, but also thinking about what are some of the coping strategies that we use and being able to model them or perhaps incorporating them into our routine, whether it is making sure that we're all getting out for some physical activity together or we're all getting to a regular bedtime or whatever it may be, listening to music, just kind of turning everything off and just listening to music for a little bit, trying to find those opportunities to do that. I also think our spaces are important, especially because we've all been in the same space now for something like 3 months, right? So we talk a lot about what is it that creates some sense of calm and comfort for us. And bringing those into our spaces. And I think this is the most obvious when our kids are babies and they find that thing that's like self-soothing. It's okay for us, even as adults, to find something that is comforting and self-soothing for us, whether it's a candle or a book and a blanket, whatever it might be. I think that just kind of goes to surrounding ourselves with the things that bring us comfort. Could be mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese was what I had for dinner, so I'm on the same page there. I know that for our family, too, my husband works from home but does computer things, and we are constantly on screens. And that is the reality of how we're doing school right now and how we're having interactions with people and how, my daughter's having interactions with friends. And while that is really important, I know that for my family, we have dinner time is the time that it is no screens. Phones go away, and that's the time that we can reconnect kind of as a family, even though we can go our own separate directions during the day. But that I know is a big thing for us. The routines are not working for us, and that's okay too. So we tried it. It's not working. We've thrown bedtime out the window. But for our family, I think this is one of the other things too, is if you don't have a color-coded routine, that's okay. Mm-hmm. If you do use screen time, as that's your soothing thing. For me, it's playing those stupid match 3 games that just is my mental break of being able to veg out for a couple of minutes. That's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. So I think that really being flexible with what your family needs and what your children need and what you need to make sure that you are a cohesive family unit, I think is really one of the most important pieces too. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Good point.
All right, so moving on to question 2. Are there certain websites or resources for parents and families that you know of that are online resources to get ideas about how to support their children's mental health, how to have conversations, how to be able to support our kids. So are there websites or resources that either of you know of off the top of your head?
I would say check out your own district's website, because school districts have gone above and beyond to put information out there for parents to help them out. And also, if you want to check out the PTA website, I'm sure you guys have so much in there. I'm always good at a Google search, too. Yeah.
And I just dropped a shameless plug into the chat because just a little bit about the Resource Center. We, at the Mental Health Association, we were leading advocates for mental health instruction in school. It's something we think was really important. I think it supports healthy outcomes for students and coping strategies. And then we were funded by the state to provide some resources and technical assistance to schools. And we so wholeheartedly believed that this is, we needed to use a public health approach to mental health instruction. That means everyone is getting information and knowledge and skill development. So staff, families, and students, that we included resources on our website for families. So I very shamelessly put it in there in the chat. You can enter based on your kind of what you're most interested in. So you can enter as an educator, you can enter as a parent. Most stuff is accessible to everyone. But if you were looking for parent resources, you can enter as a parent. And we received funding from the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation this year to provide some family education. So we have a webinar series. And we've had some 30-minute webinars we've been hosting every month since February on topics that might be of interest. And so some of those have some good strategies in them, too. I really have fallen in love with YouTube for whatever reason during this time. I just have found a lot of interesting things there, ideas and stories and TED Talks and things like that. So that's kind of been my go-to lately. But I think, you know, as you said before, Amy, everybody's different. It's not one size fits all. So I encourage you to kind of explore a little bit. And sometimes our friends are our best resources for ideas.
Absolutely. And in the chat, too, as well, both New York State PTA and PTA.org have wonderful resources online, too, that would be a good starting point. Not everything that you find and see online is going to be of quality or is going to be helpful. So you can't just Google something and think. So those are already vetted resources. They're already checked. They're already, you know, quality things that will be able to help. So those are definitely there. And if we think of other ones as we're going, we can put those in the chat as well. So here's one that has happened a few times in my house over the last couple of weeks. Sometimes anxiety and other feelings are hidden behind certain behaviors of children. So what things should parents and families be on the lookout for that would be a behavior that might have an underlying reason that we don't necessarily see? Mm-hmm. I don't know which one of you want to tackle that one first.
Well, I would say if in every child, a change in behavior looks different. If a quiet child is all of a sudden very loud, or if a loud child is all of a sudden very quiet, those are telltale signs that they're working through something. And let's be realistic for our kids right now. They are all we're all working through something. I think patience and helping them with listening as much as possible and hearing their words, and also looking at their expressions and understanding that I can't stand my brother. Maybe I am so frustrated with what's going on. It's important to breathe and not tackle the cause of the behavior until everybody is calm and in a better place. I like the ideas of check-ins. When kids are calm, that's the best time to say, how are you doing with this? When they're angry and upset or quiet and crying, that's not the best time to try to get deep inside of them. So it's important to have moments like I love the family dinner time and I love to shut everything off and have quiet time. Those are the moments when you talk about happy news, sad news, how are you doing? And sharing, I like what you also said about modeling. We have to say, you know, I was feeling really upset today. I decided to dance in the kitchen. And so another, and I'm sure that you'll say the same thing that I have written down is if there's a change in sleeping or eating, or if there's regression in potty training for the little ones, or if there's even too much sleeping. Those are all signs that maybe they're struggling a little bit with what's happening. I'm sure we're all struggling. And I think it's important to know that it takes everybody has a different process to get to the other side, whether you're 5, whether you're 15, whether you're 50. Everybody has their own journey in this, and I think we want to hold our kids' hands and tell them as often as we can, we're in this together and we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I know one of the times that happens the most in our house is bedtime. We have a tucking in the child routine, and we have one child, and so we both have tuck-in routines that are different. It's usually my husband who will spend 15 to 20 minutes in there tucking her in, and they will talk, and sometimes they'll laugh, and sometimes they'll cry, and sometimes it's that supportive time, but it's that concentrated time that's always set aside to be able to listen to each other and be able to talk to each other. And so routines like that, I think, are just as important too.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I think most of our young people, most of our kids are really having some difficulties right now. They may not, maybe varying degrees, but let's be honest, this is a difficult time. So the changes in behaviors is important. And I think when you do recognize something and want to begin to have that conversation, it's important to be really clear and use I statements. So you might say something like, I've noticed, or I'm concerned about you, rather than, I think, or things that are really projecting. So having those conversations that are just very concrete, because just saying, how are you doing?
This is my name Kevin, who lives in a welcome.
So really being very concrete and saying, this is what I'm seeing and I'm worried about you. Also, I think any kind of routine or regular check-in that you could do. I remember when my kids were younger, that was kind of the thing at dinner time. It was like the best part of the day, the worst part of the day, and we just kind of went around, and sometimes that was very telling. So having some kind of regular check-in, whether it's bedtime or dinner time, or it might be first thing in the morning if your family is all together and awake, and that's a good time of the day for you, then that's a great time to do it as well.
I think it really is important to, Lisa, what you said about not doing it in the moment of upsetness, of giving the child and you time to calm down and time to, nope, we need 5 minutes before we talk about this. Whatever this behavior was isn't acceptable, but we need 5 minutes before we discuss what's going on. So you go to your corner, I'll go to my corner, we'll set a timer, and we'll come back and talk to each other in 5 minutes. When we are more calm, when we can process both the emotions and our thoughts. In my other life as a science teacher, I'm a neuroscience nerd. I'm a big nerd anyway, but I like actually studying neuroscience. And in those times of stress, there's actually chemicals that are released in your brain that prevent learning, and they prevent you from processing because it's that fight or flight sort of situation. So you're not going to get through to a child who is in that crisis anxiety state anyway, but neither are you. And I think sometimes we just think about what the child is going through and not our own upsetness too. And we both need to be in that calm space to be able to really process what's going on and convey that message to our kids. Yeah, we really do care about you, and we're going to get through this.
I just want to pick up on that. Oh, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because your neuroscience is amazing, and we all have to realize how important it is to get oxygen to our brains when it is flipping all over, and that includes both the kids and the parents. And it's a nice thing to do during the day to take breathing breaks, to practice when you're calm. So when you do get agitated, you can breathe with your children, take deep breaths, and when you discuss the things that happened, remember, every experience is a chance for a do-over and to learn from. And if this happens again, what can we do about it next time? This is what happened. This is how you handled it. All right. Did that work out really good, or should we work on something different? So remember, times of stress and being upset are opportunities to learn how to do better next time.
And there are a ton of resources on mindfulness practice as well. That's a huge one that we could definitely be incorporating into part of our daily routines, or, especially if there are some of our children that really need that. There was a chat or a comment in the chat about saying going for walks around the block individually with my kids is usually a great time for them to open up. That also has the added benefit, too, of exercise, which also reduces the same stress hormones in your brain, and so it's not just good for you physically, it really is good for you mentally and emotionally and intellectually as well. So that's a great one too. But okay. All right. So let's see, speaking of anxiety and having those things, what are the best ways that you found or you can think of to talk to kids if they are anxious about the virus, or if the anxiety of going back to school, or, going back out into the world? Now, I have a girlfriend who 5 or 6-year-old daughter won't go outside now, even to play in their own backyard, now has anxiety about leaving the house. So how do we address that anxiety with our kids when it's either centering on the virus or what's going on in the world? How do we talk to our kids about, that anxiety?
Amy, if you want to go first, I feel bad that I keep popping in.
It's okay. It's all right. Go ahead. We'll just follow each other.
Okay. All right. There's a word, it's called desensitization. And whenever you have high anxiety and you're going from a place of feeling peaceful, and then comes the anxiety, and then you want to be peaceful again, we were talking about the brain and staying calm and using your breathing. This is two different things. Talking to your kids about COVID and helping them with their anxiety may not be related. Anxiety is a reaction in your body. So what you need to do is practice being calm. You have to talk about going back outside before you get to the door. You have to make a plan and make it clear how it's going to be okay when you eventually do walk in the door or out the door. It's important to talk about the precautions and the safety, and as a matter of conversation, just say, I read on the website that the schools are going to be cleaned 10 times a day. Isn't that wonderful? Whatever you're reading or whatever you are believing to help yourself feel strong about this. I saw that masks are really working. It makes me feel really great every time I see a mask. And even if somebody else doesn't have a mask, I have my mask. It makes me feel better. Remember, your confidence level will go to your children. So if your child is feeling very anxious, don't push him out the door. That's going to create trauma. You need to gradually make a plan, talk about it, help them get ready for that moment. When they do get to the door, you want it not to be traumatic. So you're going to be breathing at the door, and you're going to be reminding them that they're safe at every step of the way. I hope that helped, and I know, Amy, you have so many good things.
Yeah. Actually, there's a method here. I'm just going to follow you and be like, what she said. She's so smart. Thank you, Lisa. I agree, and I think one of the other things, and I spoke to this a little bit before, is we could be talking about two different things. Some anxiety that's being felt may not necessarily be related to COVID. It may just feel like it or appear as if that's the situation. So again, I think really asking about what their understanding is, because it's very possible that they've heard something that's incredibly untrue. Like, there's so much information out there for our kids that it's hard to know what kind of information they're getting. And then I think practicing those kinds of strategies, as you said, like a breathing strategy, if you're practicing that regularly, then when you need it, it's well rehearsed. And then finally, I think what causes sometimes challenges during these times is this sense of a lack of control and some real concerns about what could possibly happen. So education is really important. It sounds, cliche, but knowledge is power. And if, again, if they're getting misinformation, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Oh, yeah.
And if they're getting misinformation, that's going to make it difficult for them, too.
Well, and that's part of the, where the anxiety is too. If you can't sift through, who do I believe?
Right.
That's part of it, or, for us to be able to navigate and help them navigate through all of that as well. Absolutely.
I put in a comment on YouTube. There's a great video. It's called Time to Come In There, and it is a child-friendly story. I adore it. I wish I wrote it, but I adore it. And it really gently explains the virus, and it is a safe and beautiful way to explain it to children. I do believe in being truthful as much as the development of the child allows for you to be. The very young children, they just need to know it's a virus and we have to wash our hands and cover our faces and we will be safe. For older kids, they have a better knowledge and a greater understanding. So that would be my science mom who's going to explain about how we are taking care of today. We're taking care of next month. We're taking care of 3 months from now and a year from now. And taking care of COVID is going to be a long-term issue that we're going to deal with. And there's very smart people that are going to take care of it.
Absolutely. All right, Amy, I'm going to kick this one to you first, the next question. Okay. But it's for our educators. Okay. For any educators that are on the call at the moment, what advice do we have for working with children now, especially as it's very difficult or it's very different to connect over technology? Mm-hmm. So in terms of supporting kids' mental health over a screen and over technology, what suggestions do you have for our educators?
I think if we think back to those most basic social-emotional learning kinds of skills and how important they are right now, helping kids recognize their emotions, manage their emotions, the connections that we're building is so important. And I've seen a lot of really wonderful examples of schools working very hard to continue to build and support those connections. But I also think that this is a time and an opportunity for us to think about and plan for the next couple months, because we want to be able to maintain that as much as possible. So if there are some habits or challenges or activities or things that we can give to students related to social-emotional learning that they could perhaps continue through the summer, we've had a lot of opportunities to talk with schools, and we've kind of problem solve what are some of the ways that we can get some of this information to families, to students, so that they can continue to use these skills and practice these skills over the summer. But I think, there is, one of the biggest challenges probably is that balance between technology and having the opportunity to get kids engaged in other activities off of the computer. So some strategies that schools were already using, they can continue to be implemented, just maybe tweaked a little bit with technology. And I think staying true to as much as you can with the routines that you've established, and the language and the skills practice that you've been working on is really key. We have some resources on our website. We have this, if you scroll all the way down the bottom, there's some COVID resources for schools, and we've been providing some basic things like a gratitude calendar to work on with students, or a mood tracker to work on with students. So really just helping kids continue to connect to those social-emotional learning. And I think that ELA and science and those lots of opportunities for us to continue to have these conversations about feelings and empathy and relationships and problem solving and managing our own stress. Even when we think about things like literature review and writing prompts, I think the more, and I'm a little bit biased, I think we should be talking about this all the time, but this is a time where we really need to be bringing it into the conversation as much as we possibly can. Current events is a great time to do that as well, or a great way to do that as well.
Great. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on that one too?
For my fellow educators, the first thing you have to do is pat yourself on the back, because we had a tremendous load put on our shoulders. And I was walking through the Google Classrooms and the new regulations, and it was tremendously stressful. And I think the hardest part for teachers and educators is that we walk in and we have the show and we are ready to put on the show, and then all of a sudden we had to do it in such a different way. And in the classroom, you're this high, and on the computer, you're starting this low. And there goes your ego, and there goes your feelings of competence, and there goes your frustration that you can't see those children every day. So pat yourself on the back. Congratulate yourself. What we have done in these past few months is tremendous, and you have to realize that we all have our own journey, and you do it in your own time. My ideas for educators is look for those team meetings, because as you are trying to reach out to students, there are other teachers trying to reach out to students, and we have to do this together. Educators, I hope that you have your support staff in team meetings. I am so grateful every time a teacher reaches out to me to say, hey, this child made a comment that makes me feel uncomfortable. Awesome. I'm going to get to that kid, and I'm going to talk to that child. I'm going to check in on that family to make sure they're okay. So educators, breathe deep and know that whatever September brings, we're going to get this. And we're going to be fine. And we're going to continue to serve kids with our hearts, because that's what education is all about. So we got this.
All right, we have time for, I think, one more quick question before we get to some of the ones on the chat, but it really does dovetail with what we were just talking about, and it really is the screen time question, because there are lots of parents and lots of families that have questions about, you know, how much screen time is too much. Now that we've moved to a lot more screen time than normal, what are your thoughts about helping families to kind of navigate that new world and help them either set limits or, you know, try to help their kids through this really lots more screen time?
Oh, even I'm exhausted from my screen time. Even my own brain at the end of the day is different from a day of being at school. So this is such an important thing. I was teaching a second grader today about o'clock. Every time she sees o'clock, when the 00 comes up, let's take a break. Let's walk away. Let's look outside. Let's read a book. Let's draw. Let's just sit down and look at each other's faces for a little bit and take a breath and tell jokes. Dance to music. It is important. I'm not going to tell you a 30-minute limit, because that's out the window. We used to be able to say to parents, you know, 30 minutes is a good time. It's not going to work. But I would say look for non-electronic things to do during free time. You know, and don't watch the news.
Yeah. I agree. Amy, what are your thoughts?
Well, the same, and I think I'm not an educator, so I don't know if this is possible, but, you know, we have computers and we have laptops available to us, and so that tends to be the way we do everything. But if there's an opportunity for, maybe it is a short essay or maybe it's something else, to ask them to try to encourage students to be doing that in a video format, or writing it down and taking a picture or scanning it or whatever they need to do, just finding other ways to step away. It's interesting, as you were talking, Lisa, when we were back in our offices and I felt like I was sitting in front of my computer all the time, I did that. When I had that regular, you know, 1 hour kind of thing, I tried to get up, and even if it was to fill my water bottle or walk up and down the stairs or do something just to go. I haven't done that in 3 months, and I just as easily could have done that. I think we're caught up in this, like, urgency that we're all feeling. Maybe that's it. So definitely taking those times, and yeah, it may not be possible to say, you know, we have this certain time that we're not going to be on the screens, but it's more about adding opportunities to not be there than to say you have to shut it off at a certain time. So whatever that is, whether it says, people have said, walks around the block or bike ride or playing a game. I think some people have played a lot more games, cooking dinner together, whatever.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this. All right, so now we're going to, I'm just going to do a quick plug. If you have questions, or a reminder, I should say, if you do have questions, so those of you who are not part of the panel but are participating in the conversation, if there are questions that you would like our panelists to be able to answer, you are welcome to put those in the chat. I'm going to go and ask a couple that were sent through that chat at nyspta.org email. And so one of the first ones that came in over email was, what kind of mental health services and support do we think will be available or are available for students currently, and how do we think that may change when school starts? So that was one of the first questions. So Amy, do you know anything about, are there supports that are available for students now, and how do you see some of those supports changing when school resumes in the fall, knowing obviously that we don't really know what it's quite going to look like yet?
Right. I mean, this is going to sound like Debbie Downer here, but the fact is that even in the best of times, we don't have the workforce to serve all the people, children and adults who have mental health problems. There's a workforce shortage in the mental health field. So that is always a concern. I think we should anticipate that it's going to be harder moving into the fall. I think that, I could say as a board member, boards all across the state are struggling with budgets and not knowing what the state budgets and opportunities are going to be moving forward. I think we have to really think about building those other supports. And when we talk about, there's a great training, if you ever had the opportunity to take it, called Mental Health First Aid. And it's an evidence-based standardized training, and it has 5 steps. That 5-step plan for helping someone with an emerging mental health problem. And we talk about encouraging professional help, but we also talk about encouraging social supports and other strategies, because we may not always have access to clinical services, whether it's because of insurance or because of stigma or because of transportation. It's so important that we work with whatever resources we have within the school and within the home to make sure that people have an understanding of how they can support one another and how students can support their own wellness. And we do this as adults. We know kind of when we're feeling stressed and when we might need to do something to relieve some of that stress. We talk about mental health as a continuum, and we have some control over that, not completely, but we have some control over keeping ourselves well. That's what we need to teach our young people. So I think if we're going to rely on mental health professionals, it may be hard in some places and harder in some places than others. So we really need to build those natural support. Peer support is really wonderful too, and there's a lot of great peer support agencies, a lot of great family support agencies, and we're going to have to kind of figure out other options moving forward.
I think it's important for me at this time to plug our school counselors. We are in force, and we are wanting to help children every day, as we do every day in school. We want to be able to reach out to them at home. I know we have gone above and beyond to find all our kids, talk to all our kids, and check in on them. If a parent is concerned, we check out the way that you communicate within your building, whether it's Flipgrid or whether it is Parent Square. I'm getting messages from kids, and I'm also getting messages from parents, and I think counselors are versed in the COVID support services. And if you are feeling very stressed out, I would even put in COVID support line into a Google search wherever you are. I know that there's a lot of 1-800 lines that are now in existence, and I don't want to say one for my town because I know this is for New York State. So there are many emergent COVID support lines that you can get some help to.
Absolutely. Let me make sure.
And there is a New York State one, and I'll drop that in. I'll grab
Oh,
it
perfect.
and drop it in the chat.
That's wonderful. So there was a question on email about, has anybody developed a plan for the fall and what mental health should look like in an elementary school or a secondary school. And again, we don't necessarily know what school is going to quite look like yet. I know we do have at New York State PTA, we actually have people that are on the reopening teams who are instrumental and going to be part of the conversation about how school will look in the fall, but we don't really have any of those answers yet. So some of those questions I don't know that we're going to be able to answer necessarily, but another one of the questions that came in too is there a number that children can call for support? Like, is there a hotline, a website where kids can go if they know that they are in crisis and need help? Do we know of any of those resources that exist already?
There is a crisis text line, and I'll also put that in the chat. I think I'm assuming that whoever's asking that question probably has an older child, so the crisis chat would be a good option. I think I just kind of worry a little bit. We want to make sure that there's safe and supportive people who are currently present, but I do think that crisis chat is a option that a lot of young people have used, so I will put that one in there as well.
Absolutely, and that's actually, there was another question that came in through email as well that said, with so much happening in our digital world, schools and parents often don't find out soon enough when a child is in crisis. How important is timing and speed of response if a child is expressing thoughts of self-harm or suicide? I know as a teacher, I'll jump in quickly on that one. I'm glad that thank you for putting that in the chat as well. I know that speed is definitely critical. The sooner that you can, intervene, the better to be able to get kids help. But do either of you have thoughts, either from the elementary perspective or the mental health association perspective about, how to intervene and how to get resources to kids who are in that immediate crisis?
I do know we've unfortunately had to travel this journey, receiving a very scary and dangerous email from a child and then going quickly through the line. We do have mobile crisis teams here where I am, and we are able to get them out as quickly as we can. But I also want to tell parents, if they are feeling that their child may harm themselves, that 911 is the quickest way to get help. And I know people say, oh, I don't want to have to call, that's too much, that's being overreactive. If you are in such fear that you are afraid that your child is self-harming or is self-harming, and you need immediate help, 911 is a very important thing to do, and they can even hook you up with your local mobile crisis team.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think mobile crisis is a really great resource. Most counties now across New York State do have mobile crisis. Their time and their hours may be different, and it may have actually changed during this current situation. So I encourage anyone who thinks that that they may have a need for mobile crisis, because if we often have a sense that to call ahead of time and find out their hours, their current hours, find out also what happens when you call them, because I think that may help some people who are feeling uncomfortable because they don't know what's going to happen if I call mobile crisis, who shows up. So you can call them and ask those questions as well, and sometimes that will make people feel a little bit more comfortable. A lot of mobile crisis now are doing more of a triage, so they would take some initial information, triage, and if they think you need to go to the hospital emergency room, then they'll tell you that. If they feel like it's something that they just want to come out and do a further assessment, then they can do that as well. The other benefit to mobile crisis is that there's usually a follow-up that's conducted as part of their planning and as part of their services, which is really helpful, because we don't always get that from the emergency room. But I agree, if you need to call the emergency room, people should not feel uncomfortable or worried or concerned about what would happen if they go to the emergency room. But there's a real stigma, and I think we have to acknowledge that too.
Absolutely. That actually dovetails. Thank you. It's almost like we know, and it's already like you guys know what's on my mind, because that was the next question too. One that was emailed in really does, it was an email from a parent, but had a couple of different questions. But one of them, how do we get people to be able to talk about mental health resources? And specifically, this parent had asked about college campuses, but I don't think that it's a whole lot different on school campuses either. So either secondary or elementary school too. How do we, change the conversation about mental health and mental health issues, and provide, help for students, but also support for parents whose children may have some of those mental health issues. So it's really a dual question. How do we change that conversation?
If you think about the term mental health, we teach physical health, eating healthy. We teach so many different ways to be healthy that what we need to do and what we are doing is we are taking the idea of a holistic approach to ourselves, that feeling peaceful and mindfulness and stress, relieving stress and being living without anxiety or dealing with anxiety, all of these different topics that link to mental health are being presented. They are part of the curriculum within the schools. And I think the more we speak to teaching little ones how to talk it out, who they can talk to, and then continue that conversation as children grow, then we are addressing mental health. Mental health isn't for just a few people. Mental health is for everybody. And recognizing that there are times when you yourself can use tricks and tools to be okay, and recognizing when you do need to turn to somebody else to help you work through the problems that you're having. So I believe in that classroom education, that school education, that pervasive education that follows a child through kindergarten through 12th grade, to help them understand that taking care of your emotions is a lifelong responsibility.
Absolutely, and it's almost like, you go to the doctor if you are ill and have a sickness and you need, a checkup and you need their intervention in order to be able to get better. And it's the same thing for when you have, the mental health issues as well. You still go to a doctor and you still need expert advice and you still need some assistance, and that there's nothing wrong. It's the same thing as going to a doctor for, any other kind of illness. And I think having those conversations, especially in elementary grades, and having those kids grow up with those mindfulness practices and, being able to have conversations about emotion, I think that may start to change the conversation for the better. So I'm hoping that will be, let's see, there was one more that this same parent, that they had asked, and this one I don't know that we really can have an answer for, but they had asked, how do we change the issues of not having a designated place in school for students to go to, or not having someone available at all times to seek out. And they went into detail about when their child was in crisis, having to go through, almost a gatekeeping process of, you have to make an appointment and you have to go through, an administrative assistant to be able to access the resource at school. So I don't know that this is one that we have a question about or an answer for, but what are your thoughts as far as how do we provide that resource for our kids of being able to have somebody available whenever they're at school, to be able to have that crisis person to go to?
Yeah, and this is unfortunately a budgetary issue sometimes, and what we have to do is we have to speak to our powers that be, to the board, to the district, to your political leaders. You have to say how important it is to fund counselors, psychologists, social workers, to have a good caseload where they can walk the hallways and say good morning to everybody and be in that lunchroom to see who's having a hard time. I'm very sad to hear that that parent had that experience, and I hope that they're able to take that and proactively help not just their own child but other children. I think it's important to bring that to somebody and say very calmly and with great passion, my child needs to turn to somebody. My child needs a mental health person. And what do we need to do to make that happen?
Yeah, well, and I've seen this in the school that I teach at Sister Owner Syracuse High School, which has just around 2,000 students in grades 10 through 12. And I can tell you that we do not have the adequate resources, and there is that same keeping process that I've seen in my school, where a student will be in crisis, can I go talk to my counselor, and then they'll come back a couple minutes later, and I'll look at them when they come back to class, I'll go, couldn't you talk to them, like, what's going on, are you okay? And they'll say, no, the sister wouldn't let me in, I don't have an appointment. And meanwhile, this kid is in crisis. So that has happened in my own school as well. So I know that it is mostly a funding issue, but I think part of the question is how do we make this at the forefront of our advocacy efforts to say this is not okay. If we're going to prioritize mental health for our students and for our kids, how do we make this a louder advocacy voice?
Well, we all have to speak, and we have to speak loud, and we have to speak strong, and we have to speak firmly that mental health and counseling and support for our children in the school setting is a priority. We have to stand tall. There's a lot happening right now, and the world isn't just quarantine. The world is experiencing a lot of emotion and a lot of strong strife. And we're all going to need support as we return back to our own lives.
Absolutely. Amy, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I was thinking that for parents who are listening, really just it's an accountability piece for me. So going to your school and saying, I understand now there's, and I would start even before crisis and think about mental health education and mental health instruction. If you don't know that your school is now teaching students about mental health, then I would really question how much they're really doing that. That, being able to have those conversations. We talk to schools about how important it is to have that, I think I said this earlier, the same language, the same messaging that our students are getting, our staff are getting, and our parents are getting as well. If kids are practicing mindfulness in school, it's great for families to know that, so they might have an opportunity to practice it at home. Just that shared language. And if you're not aware of what's happening in your school with respect to that whole continuum of care, instruction and awareness, opportunities to practice coping strategies, and then what to do in a crisis, if you're not aware of what that is, then I would ask those questions. And I think that this is, there's going to be, as we go back to school, there's a lot of challenges and concerns that schools have to deal with. I mean, I can't even begin to think about how you manage a classroom of kids who have to be social distanced and wear masks and use hand sanitizers when, sometimes they are barely staying in their seats. So how do you manage all of that? So schools are going to be thinking about so many different things, but we don't want this to fall off the radar. And I don't think that it will, but I think it's okay to ask for that accountability piece, like how are we going to manage this? Because I think it's fair to expect that there's going to be more stress than there was, and more challenges and more concerns and more crises than there was last year.
Oh, absolutely. Amy, I'll kick this one to you first. This might be our last question because we got about 7 or 8 minutes left. But this came through in the email too. What are students doing to help each other during this difficult time? So, and I'll add to that as well. Do you know of ways that students are supporting each other, but then also once we do go back to school, can we think of ways that we can encourage students to be there and help support each other?
Yeah, and that's a great question because students are really incredibly important helpers in this. There was a Pew Research study poll that we have a slide and we share about it. And when kids were asked, what is the thing that you're most concerned about, they, for themselves and their peers, something like 98% of kids said anxiety and depression was the either most, the major concern or minor concern. It was the most prominent concern. So I think that when we educate students about mental health, part of that is how do you recognize when your friends or when your peer is in trouble and needs help. And so kind of arming them, too, with what do I do if I'm worried about my friends? Who do I go to? And making sure that they understand the importance of speaking up and not being concerned about whether or not their friend will be mad at them, for example. A lot of the social media platforms have security and safety measures built in, where if a student sees something that another student has posted, there's a process for them to alert the platform, and they have a process for alerting the authorities as well. But just making sure that kids understand that if they see something, they need to say something, and I think that's the message that we're giving kids. I think they're more comfortable talking about mental health in many ways than we are as adults for the most part, because it's just a different environment. As we go back, I think probably making sure that they're listened to and their concerns are validated. When we hear so much of it, it can almost become overwhelming, and I think there could be some fatigue in listening to students' stories and listening to their traumatic experiences and their challenging feelings and their concerns. We have to make sure that we're listening judgment-free and giving them that space to do that. And I think we all want to do that, but I think sometimes there's a lot of fatigue that goes along with hearing these stories over and over and over again. It can be really challenging. So we need to take care of the caregiver so that they can do that.
Absolutely. Lisa, do you have ways that you know of that students are supporting each other or that we could encourage them to when we get back to school?
When I do get to talk to the elementary kids, I laugh and laugh and laugh. Oh, I see her on FaceTime. Oh, I have a play date over video. Oh, they are of the technology world, so they're finding ways to reach out to each other. I think the adults lead the way on how the kids should be supporting each other. Teenagers, middle school kids, and elementary school kids are all different animals and beasts, and they find ways to get to each other. But again, coming back to school, there will be sensitivity to time management in terms of giving children time to speak and time to listen. There is going to be a lot of focus on making up some of the academics that are lost, but I know that we will not allow our schools to not have that focus on letting kids talk and how are we coming back together as a community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I think, do we have any sort of last ideas, last thoughts? I think we have a couple minutes left. I'm pretty sure that we have addressed all of the questions that were posted in the chat or in the email. I definitely want to thank both of you. So Lisa and Amy, this has been a fantastic conversation for me as a parent and as a teacher to be able to sort of unpack some of these ideas and really think about how we can support our children during this time, and especially once we transition back into some semblance of what life is going to look like in the future, to make sure that we have those thoughts and those ideas and those resources ready to hand as soon as our students and our children need them. So I definitely appreciate that. Either of you have any final thoughts?
I'd just like to say thank you to all the people who are out there, and I want you to pat yourself on the back because you are here listening to be a parent, to be an educator, to be someone of excellence as we are going through a crisis. I hope that you are inspired in some way, and I hope that if you are feeling stressed out, to reach out to helping people. We are there for you, and I want everybody to feel strength that we are going to get through this.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. And I just want to add that we're here for you. That if you need anything, whether it's a resource or you have a question, most of the services that we provide are free, and we cover all of New York State. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or you need any support. as hard as this time has been, I am really hopeful that we have learned some really kind of innovative strategies, and we're starting to think differently about our approach to taking care of ourselves, taking care of one another, to education. So I think there can be some real silver linings in all of this, and just a gentle reminder for some self-care as we finish up the school year, both as parents and educators.
Absolutely. Well, I want to just thank all of you, thank both of you ladies for being part of our panel this evening. This has been a fantastic conversation, and on behalf of New York State PTA, I thank you for being our experts this evening and participating in the conversation. For everybody who has listened and participated, thank you for your comments and your questions in the chat. If you do have continuing questions or things that we did not get a chance to be able to address, I put that email in the chat as well. It's chat@nyspta.org, and we'll hopefully be able to either get you some resources or be able to address those questions afterwards. And I think we have run out of time, but I want to thank you so much for sticking in with us and participating in the conversation and caring about New York State's kids.
Thank you.